I'm going to give you a quick update on corn insects. I'm a professor and extension entomologist at NDSU. And there's many different species of grasshopper, but we're good in croplands because we only have a handful really that we need to deal with. And they start emerging in May and they continue emerging, the late season ones, all the way through June. And they get into most of our crops, but they prefer the small grains, our wheat, barley, winter wheat, and oats. So the damage comes from their chewing mouth parts. They have large mouth parts and they'll defoliate or strip the leaves. They'll also, when they become adults, they can fly around and find new fields that are maturing, and they can clip pods off of soybeans, dry beans, and wheat and cause severe damage, as you can see in the pictures there. This one picture with the pile of dead grasshoppers after wheat harvest was sent to me this year from McKenzie County. They had to actually clean the grain before and get rid of all the grasshopper bodies that were in with the grain. Oftentimes the damage is on the field edges, mainly in the years where the populations aren't at outbreak levels. But the last several years with the drought, we've seen very high populations at the outbreak levels. Generally, areas with less than 25 inches of rain are at high risk. And when we have hot, dry weather, drought, that's going to increase your risk for grasshoppers, which we've seen. And then cool, wet weather will decrease the risk and also reduces the population because there's many diseases that attack the grasshopper and kill them. Here's just some more pictures on the damage. This was from sunflower where the leaves are completely ate off, as well as some of the heads. In the middle here, we have a corn where it not only ate the green leaves around the corn ear and the silks, but also got into chewing on the kernels. And on the right, we have a soybean field where they just got into the edge, but they completely defoliated the plants and ate the pods. So recently, this shows you the population levels we've been seeing for the last 2 years. And you can see in general, anything in the yellow or red would be considered economic. And you can see that it's been most high out in the western part of the state. Yeah, we do have thresholds we can use for grasshoppers. There's different ones for nymphs, which are young grasshoppers without wings versus the adult. And then also between the margin and the field. And as you expect, you would have higher populations in the margin than you would in the field. And it's difficult to count a lot of grasshoppers in a square yard. So we recommend that you get a 15-inch sweep net, and 4 180-degree sweeps is 1 square yard. And I recommend that you take at least 20 sweeps and then divide by 5 so you get a more accurate count. And you can buy these through Great Lakes IPM. They can provide you with an excellent net that will last several years, and they're only $30 to $40. Now, if you don't want a net, you can still do estimates for grasshoppers in square foot. You need to do this at 18 times in the field in different locations, and then number of grasshoppers per square foot, and then divide that total by 2, and you'll get the number per square yard, or 9 square feet. There is a new insecticide out that I want to talk about from FMC. It's a diamine group 28, chlorantraniliprole. It's a muscle poison, so it activates the muscle rhinodine receptors in the insect's muscle. And this leads to contraction and eventually death of the insect. It is a little bit slower acting than our typical nerve poisons like the pyrethroids, But we've observed in the field that as soon as they ingest the insecticide, they quit feeding and then they'll die in 1 to 3 days. So, and it's registered in corn as well as many other crops. And it's also very effective on the caterpillar pests like armyworm. For grasshoppers, you must use an MSO adjuvant at 1%. And the company recommends that you target the early instars or growth stages or the nymphs. And everything is listed here in my insect guide. Oh, sorry about that. So here's some data. We looked at grasshoppers per square yard, and we had mainly adults in this trial. There were some late instars, but 90% were adults. So you can see here, we did assessments at 4 days after treatment in blue and 9 days in orange. You can see we had significantly higher numbers of grasshoppers compared to all the treatments. So here's our warrior, which is our standard. And then we had Vanticor at a high, medium, and low rate. And you can see this is a little bit slower acting at the 4 days compared to the warrior, which is a nerve poison, so it has a much more rapid knockdown. But in the end, at 9 days, Vanticor actually had lower numbers of grasshoppers per square yard than our standard warrior. So it's excellent chemical, and it's a little more expensive than a pyrethroid. It's comparable to the high rate of a pyrethroid. But it's wonderful to have a new mode of action out there. So moving on to a couple other economic insect pests of field corn in North Dakota, it's corn rootworms. We have both the western with the stripes on the wings, and then the green one, light green or lime green, the northern as well. Most of our rootworms are the northern corn rootworm. And then, of course, we have our old pest that's been common here in North Dakota, the European corn borer, and we'll talk a little more about that. Corn rootworm, the damage is caused by the larval stage. They feed on the brace roots, which support the corn plant. And when they're weakened from the corn rootworm feeding, they can cause severe lodging as well as yield loss. Corn borer can feed as a larvae too, causing damage when it's feeding on the tassels, and you'll see the shot hole feeding. And then they eventually tunnel into the stalk and interfere with the flow of water and nutrients to the developing corn ear, and results in lower yield. And also you can get some lodging. And then of course they get up into the ear and cause direct damage to that corn. So one of the easiest things you can do is, especially for corn rootworm, is just crop rotation. Growing corn and then rotating with soybeans or wheat. For corn borer, corn borer can fly, being a moth, so it can usually find your cornfields wherever you plant it. But we really haven't seen a lot of corn borers except in non-BT corn. So if you're going to use continuous corn, there is always some continuous corn out there, we do recommend that you use a smart stack with multiple BT proteins to combat multiple insect pests that you have. So if you're not sure what you have in your traits, be sure you download from Texas A&M the handy BT trait table. It has information on a lot of different insect pests as well as the herbicides. So here you can see the smart stacks, and then here's the BT proteins, and then all the different insects abbreviated, and also the herbicide traits and the non-BT refuge percent. So using your smart stack would, control all the pests that we certainly have here in North Dakota, corn borer and corn rootworm. So I'm going to end here with just talking about some extension resources. We do a pheromone trap survey for the European corn borer. We use these homemade wire traps for surveying for them. And then we also monitor with the yellow sticky trap for corn rootworm. And you can use this as an indicator whether or not you need to employ some sort of management for corn rootworm next year based on the counts on the trap. So all the information is posted weekly on our IPM website. So I recommend that you go there and you can look at what's going on out in the state. We mainly just survey the southeast area, and TJ does Minot, but you can see both corn rootworm and European corn borer were quite low the last couple of years, and this is due to the drought that we're having. We also participate in a multi-state project that Iowa State coordinates, and anyone can get involved in this. You can see there's a lot of different states and Canadian provinces in this project. So we monitor with the yellow sticky traps, and again, the data is posted to the website. It's real-time data. So some of the other information is on the website, they summarize how much is continuous corn. So it ended up with, among all those states and areas where they had traps, 2/3 about continuous corn, and it ranged anywhere from 1 to 3 to more than 10 years continuous corn. So there's some interesting information. The most common crop that was planted after corn was soybeans. And the most common BT trait was this event here. So there's a lot of good information on their website as well. It's free. They'll provide you with traps. Growers can get involved, crop consultants, seed companies. And so it would be good to get as many people as possible in North Dakota participating. And here's a new fact sheet on corn rootworm. It was just published and updated. So there's a lot of information in there if you'd like. And I think I'm just about out of time.